exactly is soil anyways?
There's something here living under the floor. I haven't seen it, but I know it's there. No, I'm so scared I wear my underwear. That's why I don't wanna go down, down, down in the basement. I don't wanna go.
Soil structure. That is what we're going to talk about today. We talked about soil texture last time. We determined what our soil texture is, found out what our exact percentages of sand, silt, and clay is in our soils, in our lawns, in our garden beds. And by knowing that, we can sort of base our methodology and some of our practices and approaches around knowing what that is. By knowing what that soil texture is, we kind of know what we may or may not have to do in terms of how well is it draining? How well am I holding on to nutrients when I am utilizing these inputs? Alter my approach if my texture is this. I am dialed in and I know my pH, and I know that my pH is affected by these factors. And my pH being what it is, this is why my nutrient levels are here, 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 and here on my soil test. That's kind of what we talked about with soil texture, but that kind of is the precursor, sort of the prologue to the most important property of your soil, and that is soil structure. Soil structure is easily the most important part of the entire system. If all of these gears represent the different components and properties of your soil as a functioning, moving system, a working system, then it is soil structure that is this top gear that represents the most significant part of this system. If that gear was not turning at the top, then none of these other gears would move, and that is soil structure. Right, Lil?
What?
So what is it? What is soil structure? Soil structure. So the stuffy kind of textbook classic definition of soil structure will say that it is the shape in which your soil takes. And that is granular and blocky there. That is going to be in the A horizons, a little bit of the B horizon on the blocky stuff. You see that my soil was pretty granular. It looked like coffee grounds or cookie crumbs. Down below in those other subsoils, you've got prismatic and columnar. You know, those are going to be underdeveloped soils that kind of contain that shape. Platy, single grained, that is going to be a severely compacted clay-rich soil. As far as the platy, the single grained is going to be a silty, kind of a lifeless soil. And then you've got massive, which is basically something that has zero structure at all, what's called hard-setting soil. When I talk about soil structure, I'm talking about a couple of key things that work in unison with each other. I am talking about aggregation, and I am talking about porosity. Okay, when I talk about aggregation, I am talking about how those aforementioned mineral particles are held together. These sands, the silts, the clays, as well as organic material. How that is all held together in this aggregate. As I smash this in my hand, you'll see that there are tons of micro aggregates that kind of make up that macro aggregate. So within these micro and macro aggregates are micro and macro pores when we talk about pore space. The space between aggregates is your macro pore. The space between the particles that make up an aggregate is a micropore. And you want both of these. You want a good mix of both of these type of pores. You want the macropores, obviously, so water can move through that profile. But you want those micropores so that water can be held and made available to the plant root when it needs it. It's kind of a capillary sort of action in which that water is held in those micropores. Now, how do these pores get here? As evidenced by this picture, there was a little worm in there. Think about the types of tunnels that this guy is making as he goes about his daily business. He goes through that soil and he makes many a passageway, many a tunnel. Hold that thought. We will get back to the biology aspect of soil aggregation, but I do want to insert here some of the other factors that contribute to a soil structure. You know, for me, biology is everything, but there are other conventional factors that influence a soil structure. Weather, the freezing and thawing and or the wetting and drying of your soil. That is going to kind of, you know, play part in the aggregation of those particles, right? The actual abundance of those particles. That's where your soil texture comes back in again. You know, whatever your makeup is, are you clay rich? Do you have a lot of sand? If that's the case and you do have a sandy soil, you know that water is moving through the profile much quicker. You have got much larger pore space. Conversely, when you are a clay rich soil, you have smaller pores, much smaller pores, but many more pores overall. You know, that is going to factor in not only in the soil's ability to conduct that water through the profile, but also in terms of soil structure. It is the same processes as cation exchange. If you are clay rich, you've got that larger surface area holding negative charges that are actually not only attracting the mineral nutrients, but it's actually kind of attracting the individual particles and organic materials in sort of, you know, flocculating and or building that structure upon itself as well. Your organic matter content, right? Do you have a lot of humus? That humic material kind of acts as sort of binding agents, holding all of those particles together and aggregating that soil, making it strong, you know, to withstand erosion. And then there's the root activity itself. You know, the forces of those roots are kind of doing things in there to kind of hold those particles together. And then obviously human interaction, right? If we are imposing compaction on our own soil, if we are doing things on our soil detrimental to a soil structure, then that's on us. These are some of the factors that contribute to a soil structure. And again, going back to the biology piece, for me, that's everything. And here's why. When we take a look at our soils in our gardens and in our lawns, we're not looking at the individual mineral particles. We're looking at those aforementioned aggregates. And it's the biology in that soil that are making these aggregates for us. You've got your bacteria, your fungi, your earthworms. As they go about their daily business in that soil, they are pulling all of these materials together via these polysaccharides. They all produce a sticky super glue that glues all of these particles together. They take the individual mineral particles, the humic material, they bind these all together into aggregates. Let's start with the bacteria. The slime that they produce, it allows them to stick to particles as well as each other. They kind of form colonies and they sort of pull everything together, and then that is where that micro aggregate is created. And then you got our good buddies, the fungi. They come in and they help create those aggregates as well. There's a certain species of fungi that create another one of those sticky substances. It's called glomalin, if you want to get technical. But fungal hyphae are strand-like microorganisms, and as these strands kind of, you know, grow and move through those soil pores, that glomalin coats the soil particles like super glue, and it sticks all of those little micro aggregates together into macro aggregates, or the clumps that we see with our naked eye. These aggregates change that pore space, making it much easier for your soil to hold capillary water, as well as the soluble nutrients that your plant requires. As earthworms move through the soil, searching for food and going about their business, they process soil particles in search of that food. They are ingesting and ultimately excreting soil mineral particles, as well as that organic material, and they are excreted as aggregates, often referred to as worm castings. So you consider the impact that these soil organisms have as they make their way through the soil. Not just our earthworms, but all of the other animals that have the various body widths, both microorganisms and the soil fauna that we can see with our naked eye. As they move, they create spaces in between soil particles and aggregates. Pretty amazing what that life in the soil does for us, but that is a story for another time. Building that structure in our soils should be the absolute top of the priority list. When we have that proper structure in our soil, we have ample drainage. Yet we are holding water via capillary action down in those micropores. So when those plant roots need it most, it's there. Speaking of plant roots, when we have that beautiful porosity in our soil, we are growing expansive and robust root systems that get deep down in that earth, grabbing that capillary water A proper soil structure will withstand torrential downpours, desert-like droughts, freezing and thawing, extreme weather events. It will be able to withstand intense foot traffic. It is an aerobic environment. Water retention is high. Nutrient retention is high, as all of those nutrients are now held, immobilized in that microbial community right inside that root zone. So when you are utilizing those hard-earned inputs, you spend all of your hard-earned money on these products to put down into your lawn, you want to keep it there. You want it to be cycled and utilized by that plant and those microbes, and get every penny's worth of your material. So when you have structure, you don't have the runoff, you don't have the leaching, you don't have erosion problems. Life in and on that soil thrives. Poor soil structure, however, lends itself to a myriad of problems. It will not withstand any of these natural situations. It will not withstand any man-made pressures. It will collapse upon itself. There is very little life in your soil when you do not have structure, and therefore that is when we resort to tons of chemicals for the answer to compensate for something that can be improved upon if we look to this key physical property. So how do we build that structure? A couple of things here. Look after that microbial population. Do things to support those microbes, because they are doing the lion's share of work in aggregating and creating that beautiful porosity in our soil. Secondly, organic matter. Organic matter typically makes up about 5% of your soil. Remember that 45% of it is mineral, but that 5% organic matter, that little amount, is absolutely key in our soil. There is no overstating the importance of organic matter, not only for the fertility piece of it, giving not only a carbon source for the microbial community, but also for that structure piece of it. You are creating nooks and crannies. You are breaking up that clay. If you do have that hard setting soil, then you add that organic matter to sort of break up and kind of flocculate those clay particles. It is allowing that structure to develop so your roots can get deep down into that earth and do their thing. The functionality of the roots is kind of, key when we are looking to add organic matter in terms of building structure and maybe breaking up clay. Look after those microbes. They're going to do everything for you. As plants on the surface die and are decayed by bacteria and fungi, they are converted into that carbon-rich material called humus. Humus is absolute gold in our soil, pony boy. Humus consists of long chain carbon molecules that have a very large surface area, and that is where all of the key components of a CEC come into play. But beyond that, the molecular structure of humus is very sponge-like, an incredible amount of nooks and crannies. Again, a veritable condominium for all of that soil microbiology. So when you have that beautiful humus in your soil, you have got the ability to house those workers. Our goal is to continually maintain that aerobic environment for those beneficial microorganisms, because when our soils go anaerobic, that is when it is conducive to the pathogens, the bad guy organisms. But when we have that proper structure and that proper aerobic environment, it is those microbes that are doing all of this work for us. They're creating the structure in our soils. They are providing us with that natural disease suppression. They are cycling nutrients for us down in that root zone. This is starting to sound an awful lot like the next episode, the soil biology episode. And this happens to be the structure video, so I'm going to cap it here. I'm going to let you get outside and get your hands filthy. Start getting that structure going, get that porosity in your soil. Dial in on this component. This is the physical property of soil that has the most profound effect on the entire functioning system. Get out there and build that soil. Later.
It's your handle control. It's your handle control.